I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Connie Nielsen to talk all about her series Robin Hood. And I wanted to jump in by asking you about the starting point for building this character, because she sits in a royal position, but because it's the byproduct of her husband being the one in power, there's so many interesting elements and aspects at play. And then you take the time period and the way that women were treated, and there's so many things to play around with. And so I was really curious kind of where you started developing her from with all of those details in mind.
First of all, Eleanor of Aquitaine, I vividly recommend everyone on the whole planet, please watch, read the many biographies about her. It's an extraordinary woman. It's someone who has done incredible things. You got to understand, this woman at 13 was given the leadership. She became the Duchess of Aquitaine when her father died prematurely. At the age of 13, a realm that was bigger than France itself. And so this is a woman who has been extraordinarily wealthy and extraordinarily powerful. She then married the King of France and went with him on a crusade. Then she decided he wasn't really that cool, and so she married a much younger guy who was Henry of Anjou, who then became the King of England, and so she then became the Queen of England after having been the Queen of France. And so she then had 10 children more, 2 before, now 10 children more. And at some point she realizes that her husband is not going to respect the primogeniture rules of the sons, and so she is terrified that he's going to, take away the legitimacy of their rule. And at the same time, he's an absent landlord, so she is the one who, even though she's just been in prison for a long time because of her latest escapades to defend her children against her husband, and he put her to prison, and now she's coming out of it, and immediately she's figuring out, okay, what is the political landscape here? How do I gain control of this? And how do I fight for my sons? And that is who she is. And she's an incredible person. She's also, at the time, one of the most learned women at the time. She is, deeply spiritual person. And she is also a believer in arts. She's someone who basically put the whole culture of troubadour, the troubadour romance behaviors at the court. She was, a big benefactor of that. So she's an extraordinary character.
It's so fascinating, and especially with all the details that you just described, it completely makes sense as to why she feels this real sense of confinement and part of the frustration about the fact that she has to kind of create autonomy and power in this really quiet way where nobody realizes everything that she's doing. And I was curious about playing that because it's a really interesting way to walk into a room and, have this sense of power that everyone perceives, but actually the power that she really has is so much greater and so much stronger.
Well, I mean, it's also interesting to play someone who surely believes that she's, endowed this power by God. Yeah. There is a belief that, if you're a king or a queen at the time, that you're not just doing your work for the benefit of the people who are counting on you, but you're also doing God's work. And so, I've thought about she did have people put to death. And, so you have to sort of really look at what are all of those different parts of that being who did that, and at the same time, one of the most loving women on the planet. She loved her husbands and then she loved her children, just endlessly.
And the relationship that she has with her husband, we get so many details of it, but we don't see you on screen together. It's kind of the way that she describes it. And so how did the scripts kind of really give you so much of what that is? And how do you kind of set about capturing so much when it's not scenes together, but it's, well, how does it impact all the other parts of her life that we're seeing?
I feel like I almost physically embody that experience when I bring all of that stuff into the character. I feel like in every scene, I'm reminded of all of those experiences that I've been through as that character. And so when I'm doing things, when I'm writing things, when I'm dictating things, whatever I'm doing it because I am meaning to give to the audience a sense of what that was like, and how she lived and how she thought and felt, you know?
Yeah. I also think it's so interesting just kind of like watching the way that you play that sense of authority in scenes. Like there's a moment where you're sitting at the center of a kind of horseshoe shaped table and she's not sitting there watching everybody like a tennis match as they're talking. She just kind of sits back and quietly listens. And what was that sense of stillness and calmness that you wanted her to really hold as a lot of her power?
That's exactly right. I mean, she's also, I think, very amused in that scene because she's seeing all of these people like peacocks. They're just like showing all of their feathers, but you know, they're not lions. They're just peacocks. And so she's also, I think, vastly amused by people's vanity. And I think when you're dealing with the realities of power, you also can find it pretty irritating, I'm sure.
I love that you just described the amusement because it also feels like there's an amusement for her. And, you know, she's kind of the smartest one in that entire room and they don't even realize it. Like she's playing chess 3 steps ahead because
That's
she's
right.
the only one that's realized, oh, the idea of like a dashing vagabond, no wonder people are interested and want to support him. And there must be people supporting him in order for him to evade all of you this long. And so what was kind of like the amusement that you wanted to play around with on that side as well?
Well, I think, you know, she sees any crisis in her husband's realm as something that she can exploit. And so she is very interested in fact, doing one thing, and that is one thing only. She is trying to get her husband to come back from France so she can deal with the issues that are really disturbing the future for the crown. And very dangerous for the crown. And so she needs to get him back to England so that she can handle that issue. There's no better way for her to get him back to England than by helping foment whatever rebellion is already going on. You know, the bigger the rebellion, the more the chances are she'll get him back into a place where she can corner him and she can extract from him the solutions that she believes are necessary for the rightful heir to be chosen.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you about that though, because, you know, she kind of wants him back, but at the same time, she also wants him dead. And she kind
Oh
of
yeah,
talks quite gleefully about, you know, well, his mistress isn't doing enough. You know, she's very aware of his infidelities. And, you know,
absolutely.
what were the details that you kind of enjoyed from that side of the storyline just as much?
Well, I just kind of figured, you know, she's had 10 children with this man in particular, and she's had 2 more children before that. And so this is someone who probably is not absolutely raring for him to come back to make love to her whatsoever. I think she's happy that he's busy doing that somewhere else. However, she does have to remind him that matrimony at the time, you know, just was not meant to be a romantic thing. It was definitely a way to manage the safe passage of lands and wealth and power to and standing of one family to the future leg of that family.
Yeah. And because there's so much at play in terms of this political game and everything that she's trying to manage and control, there's the aspect of, well, who does she trust? And she kind of has a very good nose for bringing the right people close to her. And what was that like for you in just finding her way of needing to find people that she trusts to be her eyes and ears on the ground because she's confined physically and they can be the ones to report back to her?
Well, you know, this is someone who, since she was 13 and became this young duchess, she's had to take care of all of these Southern European nobles who would rebel here and there, and they would try to get her killed or something like that. And so she's had to dispatch them. She's had to, like, you know, literally lead armies against them. And she's also, at the time, you know, there was no telegraph or phone. And so what you had was what was called an itinerant royalty. And so that royalty had to constantly be traveling all over the world. And so she did. She traveled all over the realms of Aquitaine, of Anjou, of of France before that, and the Crusades, all of those religious lands, and now England. And so she's fully aware that there's these people that she thinks she can count on to stand with her and that she can raise an army with, because she's been doing it her whole life. Yeah. And then there's these other people that, they will probably be trouble, or they will sell their soul to whomever is, going to pay them enough. And so she's used to reading the room.
Yeah. And even the way that she brings Marian into her fold, at first it's the idea of, you can be one of those sets of eyes and ears for me, but then you also kind of see this mentorship of watching someone that she's suddenly quite impressed by, and she admits, that's not something that comes readily. And what was the mentorship side that you started to find between those two characters?
Well, you see, that she's different, right? She's different. She's not one of those entitled young court ladies, and she's not, on the other hand, one of those completely, obedient ones either. She's someone who's thinking by herself, on her own 2 feet, and she's not a drama queen. She's someone who knows how to handle herself in every situation. And that is what you want from someone like that. Someone who can handle yourself. You can't stand there and tell her what to do in every situation. So she needs to know how to think and how to observe and how to obtain what I'm asking her for. And, I kind of test her a couple of times to see, whether she has that ability. And then I realize the more I see her, the more, I'm also loving her, because being a queen means that you've taken all of your daughters and you've married them away to kings and princes in faraway lands. And so she never gets to see her daughters. And I think, she's missing her daughters, yeah. And it's rough as a queen. You have to give away the very people you love the most and want to keep close, right?
Yeah. And even just that sense of female companionship as well.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because you can't really trust all of them, necessarily.
Definitely not the men. There's also the aspect of playing someone like that where, there's kind of the public and the private persona. Very often there's people around watching and observing her. And so what were the differences that you found in playing those two different elements?
Well, I think that, there were many people who were wagging tongues about her, saying, she was having all of these affairs and so on. And, I definitely didn't believe that. I definitely believed the other historians who, in fact, showed that, at a certain point in her life, she just wasn't interested in that. She was interested in one thing only, and that is, safeguarding the future of their family's name and their power. And so, I think what you really get to see is even the relationship she has with the men who do serve her. They serve her from a different reason, not from a romantic or a sexual reason, but really from her as a leader. And, that has been a very long historical debacle for women in the way they're being portrayed in history. And I really think that we as storytellers, can really help historians along by, also just, pointing out the misogyny that is behind a lot of those types of categorizations. She's a woman, therefore must be a slut.
No, that's such a great point. Have you had that on other research that you've done for roles where you have to kind of think very specifically about the lens at which the information's being portrayed to really find your version of the truth or your interpretation for a portrayal?
Yes, but I also have been guided by so many really wonderful historians that I have read through the years, where you just can see the portraits of queens that they have made really have broken with a lot of precedent. And I've felt that also when I've done research on famous writers that I've portrayed, or famous artists, that wanted to defend them from some of the slights, but also from some of the devaluation that it still occurs because of prejudice, right? And so, we have to fight the prejudice sometimes inside even women's minds, right, about other women, and forget about the prejudice from the other genders. And so I just feel it's important that we develop like a critical, approach to these characters, and I for one like to give them all a fair shake.
No,
I mean, I won't shy away from what is, if they really did something terrible
yeah.
or they really were narcissistic assholes or something, I won't shy away from that. Sometimes it's fun to bring in the more complex character, the more like those little details.
Yeah. It's wonderful. And one of the other things I was curious about was, just working with the text and dialogue on a show like this, because there's almost kind of a rhythm to the way that the dialogue flows. And, I was just curious about your experience of working with the language and finding the specifics of it.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely Glenn, John Glenn, our writer, who's just writes this really beautiful dialogue that really provides like great moments for you to really find the rhythm of the breathing for that character. It's lovely.
Yeah. And even just the costumes as well. I imagine that when you put on those elements, that there's something that just kind of like physically kind of like lifts you up in a certain way with their particular details, and that were really helpful for you.
Certainly. We also were shooting in Serbia, where you have artisans who are still, very well versed in ancient techniques, and so you see that in every aspect of the production, with the costumes or the furniture or the armory, the cobbler. Like you cannot believe the amount of knowledge, ancient knowledge, that is actually present on a set like that. And I hope you really can see that in the production value of the show.
Yeah. I've heard someone else describe how, everybody's so familiar with the lore of the story. So wherever you
Yes.
walk, everybody has stories or connections to it.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. I also wanted to ask about the directing on the show and kind of working with Jonathan English, who directed all of the episodes of it, and just what that experience really gave you, especially to have that consistency of the same person throughout episodic.
I don't mean to correct you, but we actually had several other directors as well, not least two female directors that I'm very, very happy to say did an incredible job. Some of the biggest scenes in, for example, episode 6 is directed by a British incredible director as well. And so I hope you will look up their names and bring them into your program. They're fantastic. And I was really happy also with our producers for making that choice. Made me feel in a good spot.
Yeah, no, thank you for correcting me on my IMDb. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about, kind of going back to a lot of the power and the dynamics and things that she's trying to manage in relation to the Sheriff of Nottingham, played by Sean Bean, because again, the two of you don't share a scene immediately, but there's so much at play in terms of what she feels like she's trying to manage there. And so I just wanted to ask a little bit about that as well.
I mean, they are great characters to set up against each other. And I love the way that Sean plays the sheriff, like just absolutely loves him, because he also allows the sheriff to be flustered and annoyed and stressed. And at the same time, also, someone who is oppressing people and fighting on the side of the king. Until she maneuvers him into a place where he has to make a choice, whether to fight for her side or for the king's side. And that is a great cat and mouse game that I think we both really enjoyed playing, because it's fun.
I love that. And I'm so impressed by your wealth of knowledge on this character and all of the details. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie.
My pleasure. And thank you for all your lovely praise.